Hello, everybody. So, looks like we made it to the final module of the course. Everything is due, almost everything is due Sunday, 11:59 p.m. Make sure you get all of the assignments to me by then. That's the final deadline for the course, the ending date that was scheduled years ago. So I never extend beyond that date. And I said almost everything because remember that exams have a different schedule. Exams are on a calendar schedule, not the same as our homework schedule. So exams go Sunday to Saturday. So the exam, make sure you get that in by Saturday at 11:59 p.m. It's on goes off a calendar week instead of the regular school week. Otherwise, we have one more of the major learning objectives that we haven't seen yet, and that's NoSQL databases, the non-relational databases. The stuff we've looked at mostly is with relational databases is primarily for structured data. Let me let him in. Oh, right before you came in, Joseph, I was just reminding everybody that the exam is, remember the exams are on a different schedule than the homework. So the exams due Saturday. Please keep an eye on that. And otherwise, everything's due Sunday. So the last thing we have to cover, though, is non-relational databases, or NoSQL, as they're usually referred to, because it's a whole lot less of a mouthful. Even though we won't get quite all that far in one of the examples I have planned for today, and then the other example, they put a whole lot of effort making it look very, very similar to SQL, to the control language. That way, database administrators don't have to learn a second. Don't have to learn everything completely from scratch, or it still seems somewhat familiar as it goes together. Most of our NoSQL versions are like that. I have a couple in mind. What we've looked at so far is relational databases, where we have that nice table we can fill up. I'll draw something like this. And I'm going to use the word key for the field names. So key 1, key 2, key 3, however many fields we have, and then we set up our rows. And that's great for structured data, where we know the same stuff about everybody. A good way to think about that is like a form. Everybody fills out the same form, so all of those boxes we have on the form should correspond directly to one of the columns in our table, so we fill in we're able to fill in all the cells, or at least most of them. When we have unstructured data, or semi-structured data, unstructured data, it's like random stuff we would grab off Facebook. We have different things from everybody. Can't even really fill in the name field because while everybody's Facebook profile does require a name, there's no checks or confirmation to see if people use their real name on there. So we can't even really count on having the name field in common. So it's just sort of a random collection. And if we started trying to throw that into a table, we'd end up with more empty cells than full cells. One of the ones I have selected for today's example fits in that way. One of the ways we can view it is in tabular form, and then we'll see all the empty spots in there. Semi-structured data is kind of in between, where we know we'll have something consistent from everybody, but it's not like if everybody's filled out the same form where we know all of the same data points about everybody. There are a few consistent ones that we can rely on, but not. But there will still be a lot of empty cells if we try to put it in the table. So we need to look at those. I have 2 examples in mind. And we're just going to walk through an example. And also with that, let me pull this up. I don't know I'm not aware if people didn't necessarily look ahead at all the assignments, or if they just didn't send me a reminder. But on the NoSQL assignment, I noticed over the weekend the instructions for it still say, if I don't have them written, but if I don't have instructions here by the time we get to this assignment, somebody please send me a reminder. Nobody sent me a reminder, but those points were included from the beginning. So what I decided is we'll just use the class example as we go through it, follow along in the examples, or it's being recorded, so follow along later, and then just take some screenshots and submit the screenshots following along. Just sort of a quick introduction to a couple of the common types we have. I guess first off, there's two that I wanted to look at. There was one that I put in at the beginning of the semester, and then a second one. Oh, I saw something pop up in the chat room. Okay, somebody said didn't see it until today. It was in there, but I said probably module 7, so I threw it in module 7, but it's after the next step, so it's like after the spot that we would normally start going through those. Oh, it was visible. It should have been in the grade book. It showed for the point value, just not, there weren't any instructions in it yet. I forgot that part. But I wanted to make it somewhat easy, and it is one of our major course learning objectives. So there's two big types I wanted to go over. One of them, there's at least a question on the test about. Oh, it was in there somewhere, Janet. But it should be an easy assignment. So just basically, it's if you're here, you're gonna get the points for it. Follow along the example, and I guess for the people that aren't here, I'll send them an email afterwards and let them know to follow along the video example. So there's two big types that I wanted to cover. One of those is a basic key value pair store. Key value store is how we usually call them, which should immediately make you think of JSON from last week's homework assignments. Those key value pairs of JSON, and it's a little bit different. The one we're going to look at, we interface with it through JSON, but internally when it's stored, it's not stored as JSON. So we can also interact with it through a web interface, and then really we can think about the JSON text that we send to it is almost the same as that GUI. Right? We don't store graphical data. That's just a way to interpret what's actually stored that makes more sense to people. And with key value pairs, it's that same way. We interact with them most often through JSON or something very, very similar to JSON. That's nearly standard key value pair syntax that programmers often use. But what's stored is a little bit different. In particular, this one of the big problems, you might remember with the relational databases, we can jump right to any particular cell, all that stuff with data types. So one of the big things, the reason JSON itself doesn't work as good for a key value store database is because we don't have data types. If we try to do it all purely in JSON, we always think about it as a text file. There's some finer details we get into the inner workings of it. If we gave it the .txt extension, then it would just be text. But as long as we give it the .json extension, same thing with XML or YAML. As long as we give it the proper extension, what we see is different than what the computer sees because they are very special things. There's kind of a way to interact with it. So I did set up AWS accounts. I have to go into my Gmail account to get to it. Like I said, because I added myself as a student as well, so that while walking through the example, I have the same screens you all do. So I'm going to start. But you should have got an invitation to an AWS course. Did everybody get that invitation? Okay. And you can just hit the blue button to start up. And usually it's a good idea to keep those emails around because that blue button is a direct link to the course. Does anybody need me to resend those real quick? I'll give it a second. It should be in your email somewhere. Did you accept the AWS invitation, Joseph, in the chat room? Okay, yeah. If you already accepted the invitation, if not, it should be in your inbox somewhere. There's I can resend them, so it will be at the top of your inbox. But I just sent it out on like Saturday, I think. So it shouldn't be very deep in the email. But we can use the sandbox for this. So this is the cloud developer one. This is one of the AWS courses that comes with a certificate, an associate level certificate. I've been working through it to see if we can turn that into a course and go ahead and grab the certificate myself. If y'all want to look through there, I know a lot of people in the class, over half the class is on the software development, in the software development program. So if you look through here and kind of see what's expected, some of it should look familiar because we've been bringing more and more of this into the 200 level classes, REST APIs, containers, CI/CD pipelines, and the standard modern tools. We've been organizing our classes that way, and AWS also organized their certificate that way because that's the standard tools to use for 2023, and a few other things. But in particular, we can use the sandbox down here. There's a whole bunch of the courses that have the one we're going to look at, DynamoDB. That's AWS's sort of default key value pair store. But in particular, the reason I chose this one is because we can use the actual IDE and do it in code. Most of the AWS Academy courses don't include Cloud9, which is the AWS IDE, so we can go in there and interact with the database like we actually know something about the computer in the text file instead of through that web interface. I was going to say annoying web interface. I was trying to take care to not put the word annoying there, but if AWS is one of those with moving buttons and things like that, moving and disappearing buttons. So yeah, I find those interfaces a bit difficult to work with. This way we can look at it in the code and kind of talk about what a NoSQL database is. And then for that last assignment, yeah, just follow along the examples and it's being recorded. So you can watch it double speed later if you need to. And just take some screenshots along the way. I'll point out places to take screenshots. So when you get in the course, you accept that invitation and click the link. And after keep that email around, that link is a direct link to the course. So it's always a good idea to keep those emails around, pin them to the top of the inbox or put them in the started folder or something. But when you get in there, you'll want to go to modules and then scroll all the way down almost to the bottom. You will see the option. If you go in sandbox, that's just basically a place to go around and play around with the functionality. In 3-hour blocks, and you have a budget of $40. So I spent a while doing stuff the other day. I used up the 3 hours and then restarted it and went about another hour and a half. And you can see I only used 10 cents of that $40. So between now and the AWS courses go with Ivy Tech 2 days, so it closes on Sunday. But between now and Sunday, you have a hard time going through $40 for the resources, playing around with stuff on the AWS console. And then you hit Start Lab, and it'll spin up all the resources. This is the one for software developers, so it has to spin up more resources than some of the other AWS Academy courses. But eventually, this thing over here on the left, it doesn't really look like a button, but it is. Like, try to circle it. Oh, not in yellow. Green, that'll stand out. This thing over here, it doesn't really look like a button, but it is. And when the little light turns green, then all of the resources have been allocated to it, so we can sign up. Hopefully it won't take too long, but it does usually take a couple minutes. And that 3-hour timer does go down the whole time that it's doing that as well. Now, I've seen a lot of people panic when they're first do the courses that have AWS labs, and they'll see the timer start going down while it's spinning things up. It always does that. They're, on most of the labs, if you ever have them as an assignment in a class, if they say it's a 60-minute lab, they expect you to be able to do it in 30 minutes. So they generally double the time. So I guess while that spins up, key value pairs are, well, like we talked about, a collection of data, and we index each individual point by a key, which if you've seen arrays, we index them with numbers, but that can not the most useful way to keep track of things. So we use a word instead of a number to identify each data point, which really isn't that different than what we were doing in the tables. So I went quickly drew a table on the board here earlier. I used the word key for the field names because we have been using those. And one thing that doesn't really show up in the classroom a lot, or people don't realize, is with the key value stores, we do have to have a key for every individual value that we want to store. With a table, we can sort of abbreviate that because everything in that column has the same key. So we do the key once and then keep adding things to the column. But when we have the NoSQL types, we have to give every single value gets its own key. So instead of the table, you think of it as the table, and all those cells get split in half and hold the key and the value. And we don't have access to the column headers that are keys for lots of things. Okay, looks like that started up. So eventually it took, I don't know, it looks like that timer ran down about 4 minutes, but by the time I noticed it, but the little icon there by the AWS button turns green, and we can click that. What? I don't know why it did that.
Oh, I'm late.
Okay, so I had to, I don't know, for some reason, I'm guessing it was probably a Zoom call. I signed into Zoom on my school account, but it tried to log me in with the wrong account credentials. So if you get that message that says you don't have credentials, just log out and go back and hit the button again. It should log you in, okay? Yeah.
The same issue I had with previous class with AWS Academy. It says labs.area limited to connect Google Chrome.
Is there any message up in the address bar? Anything blocked? Well, if you follow along, the points on that assignment are just kind of participation points. So maybe take some notes or something and submit notes so that you follow along. We're not going to get very deep into it. We're going to cover 2 examples today, and they'll still be a fairly short day because it's the last week of class. I would have to troubleshoot that.
This is the last week?
Nothing's blocked. Yes.
I might not make it on the 11th for class.
Okay, that's fine.
I have a final class to take that day.
That'll be fine.
I got it working.
You got it working?
Third-party cookie tests to be enabled.
Okay. So if y'all didn't hear Carrie on there, if anybody else is getting a message over here that says Vocarium, that's one of the intermediate middleman companies providing AWS Academy. If it's blocked, you do have to enable third-party cookies or apps.
Cookies.
Third-party cookies. And then you'll be able to start the lab and get the button.
What assignment is that?
So, this is gonna be the NoSQL stuff. We're gonna go through it and sort of follow along the example. So you'll notice that on this account, there's 2 recently visited things. You probably don't have those, so if you go up to the search bar and search for Cloud9, we will need that. This is the one that's usually not included in the AWS Academy stuff. That's why we went through the cloud developer course, so we could get to Cloud9. And this is the IDE for using it. Has anybody used VS Code before? Which is sort of the VS Code is the default installation of what's known as the Electron framework. I guess I can give the whole story. There's a good story behind it. The early half of the 2010s, 2013-ish or so, a bunch of people got together on GitHub and collaborated on a community project for the perfect IDE, for the perfect text editor. So tens of thousands of programmers had input into what would be a really good text editor. And that was the kind of IDE. It was really nice and stuff. But along the way, the people that were actually in charge of that project had a lot of good ideas, like lessons learned. So after they finished that and released that, they moved on to the next project with the Electron framework. So instead of building an ideal text editor that would satisfy a lot of people, they put together a lot of programming modules or libraries or packages, or we call them something different depending on what language we're working in, but the thing we import into our code. They built a bunch of libraries that had all the pieces of a text editor. And then a programmer can sit down and build the exact text editor they want in under an hour's time, usually under 20 minutes time. You can have an IDE that is basically perfect for the project you're working on. That's called the Electron framework, and they released that, and it was a lot of people started, it's open source, so a lot of people started doing customizations of it. Microsoft released basically the default version of it as VS Code. AWS customized it quite a bit. Do you have a question, Zach?
Is that an assignment?
It's the class example for today.
Sorry, I just didn't see it on the assignment forms.
Yeah, so they built this custom one, and it's built right in. Well, we'll do some stuff with the console to point at things, because pictures can be useful, but it's an IDE that gives us control over all of the AWS services. Or a lot more control when we know those keywords and packages to use and things. So you want to go search for Cloud9 and click the Create New Environment button, and then give it some sort of name. Like example IDE, I'll call it class example IDE. Oh, something in the chat room. Yes, in the chat room, go to the sandbox and pull this up. Actually, any of the labs would have, most of the labs in there would have access to this, but if you scroll all the way to the bottom in the sandbox, that's just a place to play around with this stuff. Yes. And I was expecting it might take a couple seconds. So I was waiting for, so yeah, when AWS opens search and create a new environment, you have to give it a name. Most of the default settings are good. The one you want to change is down here under network settings. You want to set it for secure shell, SSH. SSM is the very, very secure one, which along with high levels of security is better for development environments, development stages, because then you don't accidentally break other stuff if you're, so it locks it down going both ways. So it's a better idea, but we have to set up all the credentials and permissions and all of that stuff to do the first one. So you want to switch to secure shell, and otherwise just give it a name. Use a new EC2 instance, which should be the default. We have to have a server to run our IDE on. Oh, and our repository. it automatically comes with a repository, which is nice. The default settings should all be good. Just choose your shell, and then at the bottom, hit create whenever it's ready. Get these pictures out of the way for the people in the classroom can see the screen. And might as well get the pictures out of my way here. If Zoom thumbnails are in your way, there's that menu over on the left-hand side on AWS. So that's a good place to put the Zoom thumbnails to get them out of your way. Whenever we have that navigation pane on the left. So once it spins up, you should see a screen that looks like mine, and it'll say open. This is a good thing to take a screenshot of. Take a screenshot of this, or we can do it on the next one, but it takes a minute to create this. That's why I wanted to do this one first. So when you hit that open button, it should open in a new tab. And a message will pop up in a second saying it's creating it. Might take a minute. Because it has to spin up a server for us to use and create a repository and all sorts of stuff. It is a Git repository. Do not confuse it with GitHub. GitHub is a web page that is up 24 hours a day, 7 days a year. It has better disaster recovery. GitHub would survive disasters that humanity would not. So our code is guaranteed to be there. But Git is not a centralized service, it's a distributed service. So if you're on like a team using the AWS Git repository, and everybody shuts their IDE down at the end of the day, there's no way to access that repository without turning some machine. So it has all the functionality you might know from GitHub, but except for that running 24 hours a day. Because it is just a local folder on everybody's machines. The version control system that's built in, and we have a bash terminal to control all of our stuff, or a text editor. We'll come up here, create a new file. We'll get to this in a moment. For those of us heading down a pathway like everybody in this class is, data analytics or software development, this is probably the way you want to control AWS. Like always with GUIs, graphical user interfaces, whether it's web-based or desktop or on a mobile, all those images on the GUI are just automatically set to run instructions in the background. So if we know what those instructions are, it can be a lot better to type them in. So we'll do that in a moment. What we actually want to look at, the point of this was the DynamoDB. So if you go up to the search bar and search for DynamoDB, that's sort of AWS's go-to NoSQL database, the key value pairs. Still uses the phrase table. On the website, we kind of view it in table form, which it's generally unstructured data going in things like this. So it doesn't look like much of a table when there's more empty cells than full cells, but we'll see that in a second. So on the other AWS tab, or if you need to, there's buttons in the IDE to open AWS directly and all that stuff. I think we come back over here and hit this button again, it'll open a new tab. Or goes back to the home page or something. But we will need a couple of tabs open for this. So in DynamoDB, again, we want to create a table. And we have to give it a name. It has to be unique for our accounts. So both of these, AWS naming is kind of funny at times. Some things require global names. Some things require local names. Some things region names. So always make sure you check the name. So like a bucket, you have to have a name. You have to name your buckets something that nobody else anywhere on AWS named. But for Cloud9 and DynamoDB, it just has to be our account. It doesn't necessarily have to be completely unique, but we can't give multiple IDEs the same name. Same thing with the tables. We can't give multiple tables the same name. So just come up with some sort of name for it. I'm going to call it people because I think all of y'all have seen my standard classroom examples. And just make up some random points about some fictional people. And in key value, most key value pairs, we really want to use two parts of a primary key. So we have composite primary keys most of the time, a partition key and a sort key. We have to have one or the other. Usually the partition key is required, but there's actually a third thing we kind of need that we're not going to get into today. That's called secondary indexing, and that's necessary to run queries. We're just going to do like grab all our data or grab a particular item. But to get into the really detailed queries where we can filter down to specific fields and stuff, we have to that gets a little more complicated. We have to do what's called secondary indexing. No, not necessarily. It doesn't fit in nicely for a quick introduction to these. We need key value pairs, so we have to have at least one key that everything will share. I call this people, so I'm going to go with first name. Oh, actually, we could do an ID. Let's say person ID. That's a good name for it. And notice right over here, that here's where the JSON thing breaks apart. When we get over to the text file, we'll be typing up JSON, but that's basically equivalent to what the website's doing. It's an abstract layer put on top of it because it's easy to work with. But it's not actually what's going on because JSON does not have strictly typed data. But if we don't have strictly typed things, we can't really search. We can't organize it nicely on the hard drive. Right? Like we know how big a number is. So if we have 15 numbers on the hard drive and we know each one's 64 bits, we can immediately jump to the fifth one because we know where they start and we know how big each one is. So we have to have the data types in the key value pairs as well. So we have to set up at least a partition key. Usually a sort key is a really good idea. I'm going to skip that for now and do a single field primary key. But normally with NoSQL, you want to do composite primary keys and secondary indexing. But let's give it a number ID and look at the basics for today. We don't need to get into the super complicated things. Yeah. Just be aware that global secondary indexes, I guess we have the term primary key. You can think of it as a secondary, the second key right underneath the primary key. That's important to filter it beforehand. But just kind of be aware it exists. Like when we get to the graph database after a break. We're not going to dig into traversals because I think it's a little complicated for day one quick coverage introduction examples, but we want to be aware that it exists. But that's not jumping ahead. So global secondary indexing is something we want to do. Notice there's 0 indexes in here. But when that creates, take a screenshot of that, and that's what you'll submit with for that homework assignment. I forgot to write instructions for, but included points in the syllabus. The points over for the course. Well, once the little message turns blue and it says it's all created, or you get the little thing here that says the table is now active, and click on that, and there's a whole bunch of options here. We're going to get away from this cluttered GUI here very soon, or this cluttered web interface very, very soon. I just wanted to kind of look at it. The big one we need is this orange button. It says Explore Table Items. If you go in here, this is where we do all our work with it. Scan is like a select all. That's grab everything, just grab everything. And we can apply some primitive filters to it. Query, we have to have extra indexes. We have to have specific indexes so that we can filter things ahead of time. So almost we look at scan today. And down at the bottom, it's showing the items. Currently, we don't have any. And right over here is the create item button. So we create a new item. And then we set up key value pairs. So we have some sort of index. I'll give it a number to start with. And then over here at the top left of that middle section, see the add an attribute button. We can add another key value pair, such as a string. And this one will be first name, which I often use name, but name is a keyword in just about every database we have. So just saying name is probably not the best field name. It can cause problems at times. So I'm going to go with first name and then make one up. So maybe Sally, and add a number in and throw in an age. Sally's maybe 32 years old, and add a string for the town she lives in. Zoom stuff's in the way. Maybe up here's good. Sale. And once you add all the key value pairs you need, which seems small, right? It doesn't seem like much more than we've done with when we set up our tables. But in classroom examples and tutorials, it seems small because we're not doing very big things. When our database gets big, we do have to add keys to every single value we have. That's one a lot of people don't realize at first. And when you create that, you should see something show up in the items returned. If not, just choose scan and hit the run button, and that'll grab all of our items. So we have the person ID, and that's our required thing. Our unique identifier. And then some key value pairs. Hopefully all that makes sense. Anybody have any questions about that so far? Let's go over there and what? Okay. I don't know why I logged out of here, but I'm going to come back over to the tab and do some stuff here. So I can't zoom in on the terminal. Can you all see that? Okay, I know that's really small. I can make font bigger in the text file, but like zoom is turned off. I'm holding control and scrolling right now, and notice that the web page doesn't even zoom in and out. So for the ID, they turn that off. I can make the font bigger in the text file, but that's only so helpful for us. And I guess I only looked for about 15 minutes before I got frustrated and gave up on it. But I could not figure out how to increase the font size or zoom in on the terminal. So if you have trouble seeing anything I put here, maybe throw something in the chat, ask me to put it in the chat room, or I copy it over to the text editor where it's nice and afterwards. So what we're going to do is put some stuff in there. So all of our commands, when we do it from here, and I chose to do it this way, as much as introducing really good control of AWS, better than we have off that web interface, as much as the DynamoDB thing. So this one will probably be important because cloud stuff is important in the modern world, whether you're software developer, data analytics, security, you're going to end up doing stuff on the cloud. So at some point, you're going to want to migrate from that web interface over to the terminal. All of them will start off with AWS and follow that up by the resource you're using. So AWS DynamoDB, and then we'll enter our command. And then after the command is a list of parameters. Hopefully that general structure sounds fairly familiar from other terminal things you've seen. So AWS DynamoDB, maybe we can start with list tables. And we get a list of all of the table names we have. And notice it gave that list back in JSON format, but it's not stored as JSON. remember we had to say specifically what type of data we had. The JSON is kind of like the web interface in that that's just a layer of abstraction put on top of our database because it's easy for humans to work with. I did put a comment in several people's JSON assignment last week. I think an example in the textbook or something just started with an array, and that would work in JSON, but normally that's considered bad form since JSON can handle arrays. And that array that holds all of our other data, we want to put a key to that as well, so that we have better access to it. So generally better form, but it would still work if we left that key off and just started with the array. Let's put something to the table, but I want to come up here and I can zoom in on this one. And I'm going to put the data here first instead of the terminal. I'll do have it in the terminal in a second. So I'm going to come up here and save this as single item.json. And all the normal buttons work. It's set up to be a web-based IDE. Microsoft is the only ones that thought to release the Electron framework as a desktop application. It was designed to be a web application from the beginning. So if you use VS Code, all the stuff should seem very familiar to you. Same keyboard shortcuts and everything. And we need to create a JSON file. So JSON always starts and ends with those curly braces. We have a set of things, right? Like in your math class, we have a collection of objects of some sorts, collection of things. I'm going to say that without using any computer terms. And then we have some other stuff inside of it. And in our case, we do have a required ID that we have to include. So we have to put a person ID. So we have our key, and then a colon, and then a value. And here's where DynamoDB and a lot of our other key value stores break away from JSON. It's still JSON syntax, but type is required. So when our person ID isn't a single value, we need the type parameter. So it's a string in, and then we need the number that goes in. I guess we're up to number 2. And then a comma, and then we add all of our fields that way. So we have the key, and then the value that goes to that key is another JSON key value pair that has the type and the value itself. And pass all of them in as strings. It will drop those quotation marks on the other side. So everything goes in as a string. To try to keep it a little bit more consistent. And we are in a language where the single and double quote marks do not matter. The only restriction is if you open with a single quote mark, you have to close with a single quote mark. So whichever one your preference is for that. What's some other stuff we can put in here? Let's say maybe the next person, we know their last name. We didn't catch their first name. A string, and I'm just going to put Smith. And we happen to know their shoe size, which would be a number. I can put 10.5 and go with men's shoe size. Men's shoe size, because women's shoe sizes are very, very confusing and complicated and inconsistent. Men's sizes are usually much better. They're actually based off of measurement. If you don't know what size you are, you can guys can pull out a tape measure and actually measure what size they are. Women's sizes are a little bit more complicated and confusing. What else might we know about this person? Maybe we know their favorite restaurant. Which would be a string, and maybe they like chilies. that one's on my mind because every week I usually go out to a restaurant and just cycle through the ones in Clarksville in alphabetical order. And that's the next one that I'm gonna go to. And I haven't been able to make it in like 2 weeks. And Chili's has really, really good food. I've been thinking about that. I'm ready to go get that. So that's what our data has to look like. Does all that make sense? Look kind of familiar? There was that assignment on JSON last week. It's a very, very common format. The difference from what we would normally do in JSON is if we want to get some good database functionality out of it, we have to have N for number, S for string. There's several other types, but for our intro example today, let's just do numbers and strings for everything. So that's what that's going to look like. And then we can insert that. So come down to the terminal here, or the batch console. And everything for accessing AWS starts with AWS, which seems weird here, but we are connecting to SSH, so we can do that. We can pass that instruction from any computer in the world. And if we're not directly on an AWS server, then it makes a lot more sense to start off with AWS. It does seem a little odd to type it in here directly. And we're doing stuff with our resource is going to be DynamoDB. And the command is we want to put an item in the database. And a few parameters we need. So the first thing we need is we have to know what table we're putting it in. So --table-name is our parameter, and people, I think I put a capital P there. It is actually I can scroll up, yes. It is case sensitive. So things like list tables and pulling up the keys and stuff you have is very, very kind of important because it's case sensitive. It's easy to forget which ones are uppercase, which are lowercase. Then the item we want to put in, and since we're typing JSON, this will be a lot more common. I'm going to type some JSON right here just to show you it's a mess. We'll do probably something with 2 fields. That's enough of a mess to do it all in one line in the terminal. Usually we would put that in a file, more than one thing, because I named that single item. So obviously there's an example coming up where we're going to be a whole bunch of stuff there. And we can get it from our file protocol. If you haven't seen it before, :/ means protocol. I know you've seen :/, but you may not have heard before that is the instruction for protocol. So anytime we want to explicitly tell the computer to use a certain protocol. I know everybody's seen HTTPS or HTTP : / We're telling the computer to use HTTPS protocol. We want to use file : / and notice it says our directory, we're in the environment. Environment is the top level up here. If I hover over that folder, you can see the name of it is home username, that's / environment folder. So if you have other folders, you might want to direct into those. Since we're in that folder, I can just ask for the file directly. So single item.json. And then we have to say which server it's on. If you're not sure which server you're working on the web console, just to the left of your username, it'll say what server you're working on. We are probably on US East 1. We're closer to Ohio, but Northern Virginia is the main AWS farm. So even though we're closer to the one in Ohio, we default to the overall main one. If you're worried about latency in Indiana, then you'd probably jump back to the Ohio one because it's closer. Obviously, we're physically sending the electrical signal down the wire. It can get to Indiana from Ohio quicker than from Virginia to Indiana. But we're in US East 1, so we do have to say what region we're working in. Because we can distribute the database. We don't have to keep all of it in Northern Virginia. We have some of the data in Virginia, some of the data in California, some of the data in Zimbabwe. I assume AWS has at least a couple servers there, if not a whole server. But we're in Northern Virginia. We're doing it all on this US East 1, which isn't a big fancy building. It's underneath the playground. Look up something that's on AWS US East 1, the IDE lookup, where it'll give you the geographic coordinates. I mean, you look for it, it'll show you a parking lot right next to a school, between a parking lot between a school and a like 4 or 5 acre park. And it is actually underneath of that parking lot, because why do we need a big fancy building for a bunch of servers? There's a staircase so the server administrator can get down to them. That one catches people by surprise. So no error message. No error message is good. Everybody see that command that was typed in? And if we come back over here, I'll go to the web interface. Scan is select all. So you choose scan and hit run. We should see both of those different types of data. And here we can start to see the table structure. See the semi-structured or unstructured part start to show up. We've got a bunch of empty cells in there because we didn't know any of the same stuff about those two people. But we had data points that we wanted to work with, so we need to organize them some way that we can work with them better than just in a giant text file, which is what pure JSON would be. Let me do another one. Since that worked, I'm just going to hit the up key and then scroll back, and instead of putting that in a file, I'm going to try to do a simple one here. What is, so in the chat room, got an error. What does the error message say? Error parsing parameter. That is the vaguest error message. So I believe it has to do with the file. So something went off in the file. Can you share your screen with me, Jenny? We get to point out.
No, I'm on my computer, but I can read the full thing. So, because it was taking me too long to message it. I'm on my phone for Zoom and then on my computer doing this. It says error parsing parameter.
I think I
Item
can.
expected equal received EOF for input.
So hit the end of the file too soon. So something was missing. Probably something like this. I think we'll get the same error. Let me change this so it's not the same thing. Change this back to first name. My name Dave, and we can get rid of all this stuff. I don't know if it's the exact same cause, but this should throw the same error. Weird. Okay, I don't know why it's not letting me do that. I'm going to copy and paste this. Since I changed that file. And is that the error message you received?
No.
Okay, so a lot of them will say parsing parameter, expecting name enclosed. Okay.
Mine's expecting an equal sign. That's what it says.
Expecting an equal sign.
Mm-hmm. Here, I'm just.
What marks aren't your numbers? Oh, what are you gonna do? Do you have a way to show it to me?
I'm just gonna type the whole thing out. Hold on.
Okay. So get this error message about trying to parse a file. Did you get the same error message, Joseph? Yeah, can you share your screen? I'm not sure where it was expecting an equal sign there then. So, so the problem on yours, you see on line 5, you say you're passing a string, and what's the value of Taco Bell there? Yes. So,
Okay, mine doesn't look like that though.
let's see if it is. Well, why is it expecting an equal sign?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened.
What happens if you put item equals file? Instead of a space there?
See what?
So there in the command, instead of item space file down at the bottom,
I can't hear you that well.
uh, see what happens if you put an equal sign there.
Okay.
Oh, still dash dash. So space and then item. Item equals file. So put your equals after it, and then
I still
before.
got an error.
So you want to do this?
Yeah.
Or is it running? Okay.
Okay. Go back to what it was.
See what?
So I do not see a difference there in what I type. You did create the table called people, right?
Yeah, this one. Then
Uh,
table people.
okay.
Now, what if you needed this? I mean, not this. This. Oh, that's an array. Never mind.
Oh yeah, that would be if it was an array. Do AWS and down in the terminal. Put AWS DynamoDB. Oh, they're on the Cloud9 one. Down in your bash console at the bottom of that screen.
The what?
If you go to back over to Cloud9, back to the IDE, the tab on the right. This tab, Joseph.
Oh,
Down in the bash console at the bottom.
I can't hear you.
Down there in your bash console, in the commands, yeah, down there. Type AWS DynamoDB DB list dash tables. Go ahead in there. Why does it not know about your tables?
I did the list tables and mine pulled up just like yours, so I don't know if, by the way, just saying, because I got the same error as him, but mine is listing my tables. Okay.
Oh,
I spelled it wrong.
yeah. So yeah, there's a, there it is. List tables.
or where's it? Okay.
If you push
Oh, put tables. Oh.
Wait a minute, be right back.
okay. Can you stop your screen share real quick? Yeah. You want to share your screen, Jenna? Let's see if I can.
Sure.
See if we can
Hold on.
do it. Oh. I don't know why it's expecting an equal sign. Nothing that we're doing would have an equal sign in it.
I'm gonna look up the error.
That works. So error version dash item.
I tried a couple different things while we were just sitting here because I don't know.
Oh, you haven't saved your file yet. See how there's a dot? Click on the file. So you have to put your cursor in the file and then you'll be able to save it. Now you should.
That might be the issue. I saw the dot and went up there and tried to save before and it didn't. So I was like,
Oh, yeah, if we have our focus in
We're
the,
good.
okay,
It's probably what happened with Joe's too then.
yes. Are you back by your computer, Joseph?
Wait, what'd you say?
Her file was not saved.
Oh, mine's saved. Unless, oh wait. Oh, there we
Does it
go.
have a little dot up there at the top?
The green one?
Yeah.
Like, was there like a little circle right here?
Yeah, I just saved it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you're probably gonna be good now then. Because
Yeah,
mine worked.
yeah, the normal save button behaves differently, depending on where you have focus. Because if you're focused over in the File Explorer area, the save button refers to your repository. If you're on the Bash console, it doesn't really do anything.
That makes sense.
Okay, but those did work though, right? So
I mean, it looks like it did. I don't know. No errors.
yeah, if there's no errors, then you can go over to the tab with DynamoDB on it, the web interface. I think the one to the left. And if you hit the run button, it'll requery, it'll rescan, and you should see all. And all right, so I'll go back, share my screen. Yes, so be careful about saving the files and things like that. If there's the circle there, then that means it hasn't been saved, and the save function works differently, which is just getting used to the IDE. We're working with multiple things at once. Let's see. Oh, let me clear this. And I just use the up arrow to go up to the last one. Instead of reading in a file, we can put it all as one big string. I usually do it with, we need multiple quote marks. It has to have quote marks here, so this one's going to look kind of like a mess. Oops, like that. So we need a person ID. And then just like we had before, the value for that is another key value pair with the type included. What do we have to do? 4? And a comma and maybe just a first name. Somebody else's first name, which is a string. And Bob seems like a good name. I'll close that. And something I do all the time is miss the second closing curly brace. I mostly just wanted to show you that we can type it in this way directly. It just kind of looks like a mess. Yeah, the error messages are only somewhat helpful, and AWS is another one. It's not like when we go search for problems in Python and everybody's nice, helpful to each other. The AWS experts, they kind of rude sometimes in the forums. But we can type that JSON directly in there. Just make sure you have quote marks around the entire thing. And I was mostly just putting that in there once, so you can see why it's much nicer to put it in a file. Even if we have the same file that we use over and over again and keep editing it, it's a lot easier to do it that way. So run that. Oh yeah, in the chat room, wouldn't have caught the save. Just mentioned wouldn't have caught the save thing. I recognize that because of all the times I have done that. I've hit that problem. Yeah, there was probably just half of a file or something. It might have, or just a blank file. It's hard to say if there was some saving along the way. Did you get another error message, Tuna?
What assignment is that for?
Oh, still the same thing. The class example, the NoSQL assignment.
So it's a class. Can you help me with that discussion assignment after class?
Yeah, we'll look at it after class.
I already have 2 ideas for the means. I just wanted to make sure I did it right before I.
Okay, well, we'll look at it after class. Okay, Corey, if you're following along, submit screenshots, or it's being recorded, so you can do that afterwards. It's probably about time for a break, because you can see this one item at a time takes a long time, right? We probably want to split that up. But the next steps would take a few minutes, so does 10 minutes sound good? And then we'll look at how to put a bunch of items in. All right, my laptop says 2:08, so we will get back to this at 2:18. See y'all in just a moment.